Immigration 101, Important Immigration Terms from Undocumented to USCIS. The issue of immigration is confusing, partly because there's an alphabet soup of common terms that refer to everything from policy to immigrant visas to governmental agencies. In this video, we will define some of the most common and important immigration terms, such as undocumented, dreamer, DACA, TPS, refugee, asylum seeker, legal permanent residents or green card holders, and visa. Then we will cover government agencies that are in charge of immigration policy and enforcement and their roles inside the system. They include DHS, CBP, ICE, and USCIS. Undocumented is the preferred term for referring to someone who is in the country without papers. When discussing immigration issues, it's important to remember that people are deserving of respect and dignity, no matter where they were born or their current immigration status. That's why we don't use the I word when describing the 11.5 million undocumented immigrants already in the U.S. Referring to people as illegal immigrants or aliens is not only dehumanizing, it is legally inaccurate. Most undocumented immigrants become undocumented after coming to the U.S. with valid documents and then overstaying their visa. Federal immigration law generally considers unauthorized presence in the U.S. to be a civil violation. Of the 11.5 million undocumented immigrants, 2/3 have lived in the U.S. for over a decade, and few have the ability to legalize their status. Opponents of immigration use the I word to dehumanize immigrants, strip them of their basic human rights and dignity, underscore otherness, and facilitate discriminatory actions. Words matter, and dehumanizing rhetoric can have disastrous, if not deadly, consequences. As Holocaust survivor and Nobel Peace Prize winner Elie Wiesel said, quote, "No human being is illegal." Dreamer is a term typically used to describe an undocumented young person who was either brought to the U.S. without authorization as a minor or who became undocumented as a minor. The name comes from the DREAM Act, a bill that would put these young immigrants on a pathway to citizenship. Dreamers grew up in the U.S., and for many, it's the only home they've ever known. They are American in every way except on paper. Despite numerous bipartisan attempts, the DREAM Act has never been passed through both houses of Congress, leaving the status of these longtime immigrants up in the air. In 2012, President Obama signed Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, an executive order. DACA allowed dreamers who arrived in the U.S. prior to their 16th birthday and before June 2007 to apply for a 2-year work permit if they paid a $500 fee and passed a background check. Some 800,000 dreamers are now DACA recipients. Unfortunately, though, not all dreamers fit this narrow definition. This program led to 7 years and counting of increased opportunity for DACA recipients who had previously not been able to work legally and lived under the risk of deportation, even though they grew up in the United States. With DACA, many recipients have been able to pursue their dream careers, buy houses, and start businesses. In 2017, Donald Trump attempted to end DACA, leaving the program's recipients in limbo while the courts decided if Trump's actions were constitutional. Ultimately, a legislative fix will be required to permanently protect these young people who call the United States home. Created by Congress in 1990, TPS was designed to protect immigrants already living in the U.S. by allowing them to legally live and work here if their native country was undergoing humanitarian crisis, destabilizing natural disasters, or other dangerous conditions. Once a TPS designation is made, those already in the United States from a designated country can apply for protection if they pass a background check and pay a fee. The Department of Homeland Security then reviews the conditions in that country every 6 to 18 months. If the dangerous conditions persist, they can extend the protections. There were 10 countries under TPS when Donald Trump took office, but his administration ended almost all of those protections, even though dangerous conditions on the ground have not changed. This has left more than 425,000 immigrants living in limbo as courts determine their ability to remain in the U.S. Many of these immigrants have lived in the U.S. for decades and have families and U.S. citizen children, and they have spent years working and contributing to their communities. Like DACA, a legislative fix will be required in order to avoid uprooting these families. A refugee is someone who applies to seek refuge in a safe nation while they are in another country because they are fleeing turmoil or destabilizing conditions. If granted refugee status by the safe nation, the refugee is resettled into that safe nation. In the U.S., only a limited number of refugees are granted resettlement status each year. The numerical cap is set by the president. The Trump administration has dramatically lowered the caps for refugees, resettling as few refugees as possible. Much like a refugee, someone seeking asylum has fled danger in their home country, but to be an asylee, you must have already reached your intended country. Once there, asylees apply to remain in that country by explaining the conditions in their home country that led to their departure. In the U.S., there are no caps on the number of asylees, but there is a long and difficult process in which asylees must explain their credible fear and show proof that they are being persecuted in their home country. The Trump administration has made many changes to the asylum process, and will detail those in a later video. Legal permanent residents are also commonly referred to as green card holders. They are non-citizens who are allowed to permanently live and work in the United States. They can work, own property, receive financial assistance at public colleges and universities, and join the armed forces. They can also apply to become U.S. citizens if they meet certain eligibility requirements after living in the U.S. for 5 years. In contrast to LPRs, someone who has entered the country on a visa is a non-citizen with temporary permission to enter and sometimes reside in the country. There are two main types of visas: non-immigrant visas and immigrant visas. Non-immigrant visas are issued to individuals who intend to stay in the country for only a specific period of time. Some of the most common types of these visas are for business, tourism, education, and work. Immigrant visas are issued to individuals who intend to stay with the opportunity to become a permanent resident. These visas are hard to obtain and in many cases require a citizen to petition on behalf of the immigrant. The government agencies that oversee the U.S. immigration system are relatively new. Before 9/11, they were an entity called INS, Immigration and Naturalization Services. Today, there are at least 3 major agencies under the Department of Homeland Security that implement our nation's immigration policies. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, was created in 2002 and is the umbrella department overseeing 22 different federal agencies, including ICE, CBP, USCIS, TSA, FEMA, and more. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, handles immigration enforcement in the interior of the U.S. When we reference federal immigration agents who come to jails to pick up immigrants, or agents who carry out immigration raids, or agents who come to the homes or courthouses to arrest immigrants, we are usually talking about ICE. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, are the agents you'll see at the borders and at airports when you are leaving or entering the U.S. CBP also interacts with the migrants and asylum seekers who come to the U.S.-Mexico border. CBP also has broad powers to operate anywhere in the U.S. that's within 100 miles of any land or coastal border. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, is the department that handles the paperwork, naturalizations, and citizenship. It administers green cards, visas, and employment authorization. It also handles DACA applications, temporary protected status, and more. Want to go deeper and learn more? Check out our website, americasvoice.org. Make sure to subscribe, like, and comment to see the next video in the series, and so that others can find this video as well.